RMarkdown is a way to create sort of reproducible research in R. So it's similar to like Jupyter Notebooks, if you guys have ever used that. That's really popular with Python, and a lot of like, if you ever take a computer science course, you'll always like do something in a Jupyter Notebook and submit that to your TAs and stuff like that. So basically, like, I think I linked to this, maybe, or I've definitely provided a link in like the document that's on Courseworks. Basically, the way it works is you just have to write an RMarkdown file, and I'll go into this into what that involves. And that uses Markdown syntax, which is like the whole point of it is to make it like very readable and like user friendly. So if you've ever done a project or like worked on GitHub for like code and stuff like that, a lot of the sort of issues you can post there or the documentation that you can write is done using Markdown syntax. So basically, we're just going to do this part, and then when we render our Markdown document, RStudio is going to do like all of the knitting, the like converting to a Markdown document, and then passing it through Pandoc so that it can actually be like an HTML file or a PDF file. So unless you have LaTeX on your system, which is what people use to write math, whenever you like knit your R Markdown document, or whenever you render it to HTML, so that's just like a browser page, and I'll like go over what that is. But this is just like the overview, and you can get more details from like this link, and it's in the documents that I've provided on Courseworks. So if you haven't already, go to the Courseworks website and download the zip file that contains some of the tutorial stuff that we're going to go over today. And then if you've extracted it, you should have three, I guess depending on what machine you're on, you should have 3 or 4 objects. So you're going to have an R Markdown file, and usually it ends with like a .rmd extension. Click it. Okay. I haven't used Windows in a while, so bear with me. And then there's an HTML document, which basically when we render this R Markdown document, we get an HTML document, and here's some figures that we're going to include in our document. Okay. So if you open this up, it should open up in RStudio, which you were told to download. And if you haven't already, install the R Markdown package. So you can just go install.packages, and then in quotes, write R Markdown. And if you want, you can do dependency is equal to. Okay. So it might take some time. Okay? Not okay?
I got an error, but I'll figure it out.
Is it? Can you like look and see, like what does it look like?
I restarted R, so let me just.
If you do it in RStudio, that's the best place to do it.
What's the command? It's r.install.
It's install.packages.
Sorry, as you can tell, I'm new to R.
Yeah. Let me bring it up.
I'm good.
Okay.
What is the dependency to?
I mean, if there's any like dependencies for this package, it'll just automatically like install them instead of like asking or whatever. So like a lot of stuff, like when we use rstan-arm, it has some packages that it depends on that you might want to just install automatically if you don't already have them installed. Okay. So this file here is what is like our Markdown file, and it's going to create this HTML file. So if you go back, look for the one that might have whatever like browser you've like set all of your HTML files to open. And if you open it, so you'll create, when we render that document, you'll essentially create something that looks like this. Okay? Does it all open on you guys' computer? So you can do different things, like put a table of contents in there. So I talk about like a primer on Markdown syntax and what that is. I talk a little bit about LaTeX and how to include that into RMarkdown if you want to do your math that way. It's not required, but it's like a good skill to have, more so if you're gonna stay in university and like do research or whatever. A lot of like publications are written in LaTeX just because it's like a really good format. Then I talk about code chunks, and I'll go on. I'll discuss what that is in the RMarkdown file. Some best practices for your homework, and if you don't want to use LaTeX for your math, you can always include an image of your math, and then mention that in the homework. Okay, so let's go back. So that's final result. This is like big picture stuff, right? So it's like our Markdown file. You're gonna basically render this into something that looks like this. Right? If you want to like just create your own like our Markdown file from scratch, and like the template in RStudio, like they give you a bit like a little bit of description about like what a code chunk is and how to add a plot and stuff like that. You can either go to File, New File, and click R Markdown. Or if you click this thing, it's like a piece of paper with a plus on it, and then you can just go and click on R Markdown. Okay. Okay, cool. So then you should get to this. Is that where you guys got to? Right. If you went if you clicked on one of these files, right? So this is like imagine like then you have a homework assignment. I've given you a template, but imagine you just want to start from scratch or whatever. You can go to File, New File, R Markdown, and then it should come up like this. It'll say like title, author, right? So then you can just like write the title, homework 1, author, me. And then you want it to output to HTML. You can always override this like later on. Just like select it for now, and then click OK. It'll open up a document. Let me just zoom out so I can like show you guys more. I guess that's as far. Can you guys read that? Is that still okay? Yeah. Okay. So when we created that, we had like an untyped it basically creates an R Markdown file, but you need to save that somewhere. So if you hit like whatever you need to do to save, like save as. Okay, cool. And then if you go to, I guess, can I save to desktop? I can save it down. So we'll save it as like homework 1.
You start a new R Markdown file, is it doing anything with formatting besides just adding the suffix? Like, can you just open and do a new document .rmd and it's
pretty much, as long as it's like not like a Word document, it has to be like a
text editor?
Yeah, basically, yeah. You should be able to do that. And then you can hit save. You can save it wherever. Where did I save it in this case? Okay, so it's there. So then if you hit knit HTML or file knit document, all goes well. it should knit. And like basically that's doing that render part, and then it'll produce the RMarkdown. Cool. And then it opens up, not in a browser, but in RStudio's little like IDE environment. Okay. Did everyone get there? Nods or something. If you're in RStudio, if you're working through RStudio, then you'll be able to get there. If not, then you won't have some of these options. Okay, so this is like the rendered version of this document here. And you can see that we have like different components to this document. There's like something that looks like a header. We have these things that are called code chunks. There's some text. There's some formatting going on, right? With like, if I pull up what it created. So it's like that RMarkdown bit got rendered here, the homework 1 bit got rendered up here, right? With all these different sort of settings and whatnot. Okay, and there's like different like sort of options you can provide into your chunks and stuff like that. So we'll go back to the, so that's if you want to create one from scratch. And I've actually included a template that you guys should use to do your homework. So it's going to be like, there's some advice on how to do the homework, like how to format your homework in that template. So use that, like whenever you get a new assignment, just do all your homework within that template. Okay, so if we go back to the tutorial document. So for those of you who just come like on CourseWorks, there's our Markdown folder, and in there, there's a tutorial which you can download. And you can unzip that, and then this file should be in there, and just like double click on that, and it should open in RStudio, or open it in RStudio if you have to. Okay, so same thing. If I knit this or render this, right? However, like whichever way you want to do it, I get that HTML document that was on the drive, like in that folder, right? If I delete that, where it is. Right. Or I can like call it something else. Go back to it, I knit again, or I render again. It actually created, like it's actually creating that specific document with the file name of the RMarkdown file name. Okay, without the like .rmd extension. Okay, so let's go through what each of the pieces mean, so that you can understand how to edit your documents and stuff. So. Okay, for this, I'm just gonna, because you don't really need a table of contents in your thing, it's just to help you guys go through that document. This is what you're, like, it's called a YAML, rhymes with camel, header. So it's gonna consist of your title, the title of the document. So in this case, since Ben's calling them assignments, your first homework will be assignment 1, right? It's gonna have your name, and then just append your uni onto that, like that. And the date, preferably the due date, but that's like, just helps to keep track of documents if it's just the due date, but that's not that big of a deal. And the output is going to be HTML document, right? That's what yours is going to look like. You know, and whenever you want to like render this, I change a few things like, and if I knit this, the changes will appear, right? That's what that header is referring to. Okay. So going back to the tutorial document. It might be helpful if you look at it side by side. Somewhat helpful. Okay, so again, we have that header part. So in this case, I'm calling it Bayesian statistics for the social sciences. If any of you know HTML, you can like put in HTML tags, right? And it will do that, but that's not like a big deal. It's just a little formatting thing. You're going to be the author with your uni. It's going to have the date, and the difference was you didn't have that table of contents thing. You basically didn't have this. Don't change this though. And it looks something like that, right? There. Okay. If you want to comment out stuff within RMarkdown and you don't want it to appear on your rendered document, okay, then you can use these HTML style like commenting out tags, okay? So it'll just appear in your RMD file. Little things, if you want to put in a horizontal line, you can do it like that with 3 stars. So your document's going to consist of code chunks, and this is an example of one of the code chunks. And anything you sort of declare in here, this might become important later on, but like for this assignment, it's not that big of a deal. Anything you declare there will sort of apply to all of the other code chunks. It's like a global default in a sense. Okay, so that's an example of a code chunk. So a primer on Markdown syntax. So I tried to be as clear as possible so you could map these back and forth. So first thing, if you just want to include text, you just type. Literally just start typing and it's going to treat it as like sort of a paragraph, okay? If you want to add a URL link, then like these are all URL links. Does anyone see a pattern in how these are like linked? So this bit here refers to this. Oh, yeah, refers to that.
Just the bracket with the word and then the parentheses and
The link.
blank.
Yeah, and then the way I've done the list is you can just do, so basically in order to make a URL link, you just have to do a bracket and a parentheses. So the name is going to go here, like I wrote tutorial. And then your URL link goes there, right? Which is the format of this one. And that's how I put in that link there. In case you want to link to some stuff. So the way you do a list is you literally just do a star. So this is an unordered list. And if I render this, you put it there, right? So I got rid of it. If I knit it again. So use this, like this will exist on Courseworks. Like I'm not gonna do anything with it unless there's like a broken link or something. But like play around with this, like see what you can do, what you can't do. So that like try to make your homework as legible and like organized as possible, because then we can just give you feedback quicker, right? And then you can improve as you progress through the course. So okay, All right, cool. And if you want to do an ordered list, same concept with stars, but you just do numbers. Okay, so that's the point of Markdown. It's supposed to be like super straightforward. If you want to do a header, so this is called a header. You can just put that in with two hash marks or pound signs, I guess, depending on where in the world you're from. And then you can put subheaders as follows. So in like the homework advice or template that I've put up, I've told you guys to put question numbers with 2 pound signs, and any subheaders within your question numbers, like if Ben has parts that actually like are like consuming a lot of space in your document, then put those in with like 3 or 4 pound signs as needed. So it just, it just nests things. Well. Okay. So as an example, so the main header has 2 pound signs. The like subheader of that header has 3. If I render it, there, it's sort of like the weight of the text is a little less. So that's just a nice way to organize your work. Never use this. Never use the first pound sign. So that's reserved for your the title of your document. Okay, it'll just get really confusing. Okay, if you have questions, like just ask now so that you can do the work and not worry about like silly coding things. So like in this ordered list, so I talked about the header text, italic text can be done. There's a couple ways you can do it. Just stick to this way for now. You just have to surround the text between a pair of stars. Okay, so I've written italic text here, and then here it is, done by nesting within the stars. And then bold text, 2 stars. If you want to strike through the text for whatever reason, you do it with like 2 tildes, like 2 squigglies. And then you can like have a nested list. So you can like, if you tab twice, you can add like bullets within an ordered list or an unordered list. You can put a table in. I mean, it looks kind of messy because it's squashed. That's what a table would look like if you wanted to do it in Markdown. But like just try to do it in LaTeX, or like just create a table in R somehow using like Stargazer or Xtable or something like that. Okay. Because that's what it ends up looking like. And yeah, I mean, it's Markdown is generally designed for like online stuff. So like when a lot of websites are done using Jekyll, which uses Markdown, and it's just a really easy way to like format like a site or an HTML document, and it happens to be a really convenient way to write a document like this. You don't have to worry about like all these tags. It's just, you just have to remember a couple of things like stars, like these hash marks for headers and stuff like that. Okay, so for those of you that do know LaTeX, you can include inline mathematics code with a pair of dollar signs. And if you want, if you want to display your code display the full equation, like separate from like a paragraph of equations itself, then you can do that by nesting the equations in like a double pair of dollar signs. So let's go to the example. So here I said an example of using LaTeX in RMarkdown is provided below. That's this line here. And so I've used like, this is all the stuff within the dollar signs or the double dollar signs. This is all LaTeX code, right? And it's just a way to sort of write your math nicely. How many people have used LaTeX? Just like a few? Okay. You can just do the math on paper, take a photo, play with the contrast so you're not killing Terry and my eyes as we read it. And you can just include, I'll show you, at the end of this document, I'll show you how to include an external image into your RMarkdown file, and you can just include stuff like that. Yeah, so this is all this math that's, I'm just talking about the posterior distribution, which Ben went over in class, and this is like talking about the likelihood. All this is done using LaTeX. Okay, so we haven't actually dealt with R code yet, right? This is just like the document, the wording, formatting, and adding math if you know LaTeX. So in order to actually add a piece of R code, you have to include it within something called a code chunk, which you can create by doing a pair of triple backticks. So backticks are not quotes. So this is a double quote. This is a single quote. And usually on the top left of most keyboards, that's a backtick. Okay? So that creates a code chunk within here. Okay. And then here are some options you can provide into code chunks, because sometimes you'll want to show your code and not the output, like warnings or messages or like print statements that that code produces, just to show, you know, Ben, Terry, and I that you know what's going on or whatever. Sometimes you won't want to show the code, but you want to plot the image. So like you don't want to show the code, but you want to show the output. So that's typical if you want to plot an image or something like I don't really care that much about how you've plotted the image as long as it looks right. And so these are all the options. And this option is not that necessary right now. Cache equals true. When you start using rstan-rm and rstan, it becomes kind of important because depending on the homework assignments that Ben gives you, it can take a while for your models to fit. So instead of running your model every time, you might just want to run it once at the beginning and then play around with all your formatting and then remove cache equals true and run it again at the end. So that, like, I'll talk more about that when we actually do stuff in rstan-rm and rstan. But I've tried to put as much information here as possible in case. Okay, and then I just went over the homework formatting best practices. So that's also in the template document. So it's basically the stuff that I've just gone over. Use LaTeX if you can, otherwise you don't have to. You know, don't use the first pound sign for your headers. You know, be organized, and if you put a figure in, label it as much as possible. Like we won't take marks off for over labeling, but under, like, if you forget the x-axis title or a plot title or whatever, or a legend when a legend is necessary, then we'll take off marks for that. Okay, so here is an example of a code chunk. So here's what it looks like when it's rendered. So I have the header talking about, you know, examples of code and output in RMarkdown. Here's some text that explains something about the code that's to come. Should explain more, like talk about, like, you know, I'm going to generate a 3x3 grid of beta distributions using various parameters and also plot the mean. And then within the triple backticks, we have the code chunk. And then within the curly brackets, we have some information. So this first piece of information is the type of code that's going in. I think with the most recent version of RStudio, you can actually include like Python code and C++ code and some other code languages like within your R file, which is pretty cool, but not necessary in this class. So at first, that should always be R. Then you have a title for this code chunk. So in this case, I'm calling it data generation process and grid plot. Include equals true is basically saying include the code chunk and include the output, right? So if I said include equals false, then it's not going to present the code, but sorry, it's not going to present the results, but it will present the code. Oh, sorry, it won't present the results or the code, but it executes the code. Oh, man. Yeah.
What do those default to? So include and echo.
I think it will default to include equals true always. I'm pretty sure. But just to get a hang of it, just put them in just to be safe. So if I say include equals false and I render this, nothing should appear. Right? So those are examples of code in Markdown. Here's an example of the code chunk. The code chunk's not there. The plot's not there. We jump straight to here. Okay, using the echo equals false.
You have that fig.height and fig.align. Is it going to throw an error if the following code like doesn't yield a figure and yields just text or something?
I don't know, actually. That's a good question. I don't know. I have to think about it.
All right. Well, yeah, that's important.
But generally, sort of know what
You're just like
Yeah.
you just have to tell it what's coming before it.
So, oh, well, actually, I don't have to specify that at all. If that was like where you're, so like this stuff is not necessary.
It'll just kind of spit it to the screen.
It'll produce a figure. So, okay. So this is what, so on the right is what was the default in terms of what I like sent to you guys. So then I deleted this stuff, the options like fig height equals 7 and fig align equals center. So then I had set it so that, the document looks a bit nice. If I pull this out, I'm pretty sure it was like on the left, yeah. So
Okay.
It's just ways to like make your code, make the output of your code look nice. It's not going to do anything if it's actually spitting out results. So like, that's not like fig height or whatever, and like fig.height equals whatever number, or fig.align equals center. It's not going to have any impact on anything that your code, any parts of your code that print to the console. Okay, let's go back to the original. So Ben went over the beta distribution. Here's like an example of various beta distributions with different parameters. This plot is fine except for the fact that the red bar is not labeled and the black line is not labeled. Okay, so always, even if you don't include it within the figure, at least include it somewhere here, right? Like, okay. So the other interesting code chunk option that you might want to use is echo equals false. So that will execute the code and it will produce the results of the code, not just a plot. It'll actually produce any results. And so you'll just see the results, not the code. Don't do this if you've got like a lot of like stuff happening in terms of like model fitting or calculations, because sometimes Trey and I will want to see what calculations you've done in the code. But if it's just like, in this case, I'm just plotting the data, as long as you explain what you've plotted in terms of like, describing the X and Y axis, give your plots a title, that should be fine. So there's like no model fitting happening here, no like calculations or anything like that, just pure plotting. And just as with an R, if you want to include comments, like inline comments in your code, you can just put that in with the hash sign within the code chunk. It doesn't appear because what is that? Okay, so you got that like comment block or inline comment there. That's sometimes nice if you're like going through stuff. Like just let us know what's going through your head. Like these are like I don't know what you plan on doing on doing with your career or whatever after this, but generally that's like really helpful even to yourself, because you coding in January will be very different to you coding in May. Like if you look back at some of your code, you might not realize what you're doing. Yeah.
How do the code blocks handle loading libraries? Is that something you should do universally at the start if you know you're going to use it later? Or?
Yeah, so it'll feed, like I can use this, so like I'll put libraries on hold for a second, but like I can use the data set that I just loaded in this code chunk, in this code chunk. So in terms of libraries,
Okay, so
typically just go to the top, have something that doesn't like echo equals false or whatever, or even like messages and warnings equal false, because I don't really care about the warnings and messages. And then you can put like library, ggplot, library, whatever libraries you're using. Like when you come across using like rstan arm and rstan, you can put that like that in a code chunk. Yeah.
Can you import functions you wrote in another code?
You should be able to, but don't.
Okay.
Because I won't
see it.
know. Yeah, I need to know like what those functions are doing. Because with like, if it's a function in an existing package on CRAN, I can just go through your RMarkdown file, figure out what package produced that function, and if I don't have that library, I can then like figure out what you're doing. But otherwise, I'll have to like chase you up. Yeah, just define your functions within here, and just do echo equals false.
Okay.
Where was I? Okay. Code chunks. So I put an example of like doing side-by-side plots. Try to like figure out how to do these things. Like don't just give me like plot after plot after plot. Like, plots like this. Like now is a good time to sort of iron out any like issues you have with the code, because then you can produce something that's like easily readable and conveys like what you're trying to convey in your homework assignments. So yeah, whatever you declare in a previous code chunk, it's going to be used in the next code chunk, and like in the code chunks that follow. So previously I defined that to be the Swiss data that's built into R, and it's about like Swiss fertility in 1888 or something like that. And I fit a basic linear regression model using LM, plotted stuff out. So notice in my next code chunk, like here and here, I called it like Swiss fit in terms of I'm fitting the model. I included it so that you know what's going on, like in terms of like model fitting and predictions. So in the next code chunk, again, R, code chunk identifier. This case, it wasn't really that necessary to show you the code because I'm just plotting what I created in the previous chunk. And that's here, gave it a legend and whatnot. Okay, so if you don't want to do your math in LaTeX or like, you don't know how, it's going to take too much time to learn, then you can load an external figure with this line of code, that command. So it doesn't go in a code chunk, it actually goes in outside the code chunks within your RMarkdown document. So the syntax is exclamation mark, then you have an open and closed bracket that contains your optional like caption text, and then in parentheses you have a path to figure. So it's pretty much just like the way you'd specify a URL, a hyperlink, sorry, instead of the URL you have the figure path. You have an exclamation mark before, and then you have some caption text instead of like the text that you're trying to link to the URL. So in the folder I provided on Courseworks, there's a folder within called Figures, and then I had 2 images. One was like an external plot. One was oh, what just happened? Okay. Windows really sucks. Sorry if anyone's using Windows. So yeah, so if you do your math on paper, like Ben mentioned in the homework, take a photo of it. To be organized, put it in a folder called Figures or Math or whatever, and then you can have the path be, math, problem 1B, problem 1C. For some of you that know HTML and want to like sort of tinker with the positioning of the image or the size of the image, you can use the image tag from HTML, but not necessarily. Just like whatever you do, just think, is it legible, is it organized? If the answer is yes, then you're good to go. So there are some examples of like doing it. The images, like the external images. Any questions? It's kind of like fast and rushed. And also on a computer I don't know how to use. No question is a stupid question. So the template is also, I'll just go over that real quick. The template is on Courseworks. Okay. So that's what the template's going to look like. Have the assignment title, your name, your uni, your assignment due date, headings as I mentioned, and please use the double # for your questions, and then within you can do triple. It's also not like super nice. Like for this homework assignment, Ben's put it together like in bullet points. You don't have to have like, I think there was like a expectation of X. Like it doesn't have to be like now. And then like, I think it was something like this, like expectation, and then the variance. Like I don't need like huge headers for you to convey that information. You can just put it in bold or just whatever looks reasonable. You can do that if you want. I won't judge you. Okay. Also, do all your homework in RMarkdown, basically. Don't do anything else. I'll hang around if people want to ask me something, if there's like something not working right on their computer. I'm limited in that I only know how to use a Mac or maybe a Linux machine. Terry used Windows, right? Yeah, so Terry can copy it. Have you downloaded the latest version of R?
Yeah.
You have?
I downloaded
R Studio. So make sure, put on R Studio. R Studio. Oh no, go back and click. Go back. What does it say the version number there? I would download the latest version of R. How long has it been since you downloaded R? Okay, yeah, download the latest version of R and then maybe even update R Studio if it's not up to date. Then install packages should work. If anything like that doesn't work, just post it to Piazza. Like Ben is like a wizard at like solving. Just give me 1 second. Let me just